The year is 1950, and the UK resident German emigre Helmut Gernsheim is on the hunt for a priceless artifact. For 5 years, he and his wife Alison have been collecting old photographs, scouring bookshops and antique shops for discarded works, rescuing many from oblivion in the process. One, however, has eluded them. It's a pewter plate created by the Frenchman Joseph Nicéphore Niépce in the 1820s. If found, it would be the earliest successful photograph known to exist. Yet, it has been missing in the UK for over 50 years. Gernsheim takes to the national press, the Times and the Observer, in the hope of publicising his search and perhaps reaching someone who can provide a crucial shred of information. How, though, did the world's earliest photograph, a monument to one of the 19th century's most significant inventions, go missing? And how has this prized artifact, the work of a Frenchman, ended up in the UK? To answer these questions, we have to trace the history of Niépce and photography. Nicéphore Niépce was born in 1765 with a silver spoon in his mouth. As the son of a king's councillor, he was well off enough to pursue his interests in the sciences without the distraction of needing to earn a living. Other than spending some time as an army officer, he was free to immerse himself in experimentation at Le Glas, his family's Burgundian estate. One outcome of these experiments was the Paléolithore, an internal combustion engine that Niépce worked on and patented with his brother Claude. In time, Niépce began to experiment with photography. He was first interested in the challenge of using chemical methods and light to reproduce drawings, but then quickly moved on to the idea of using a camera to fix an image from nature, a scene or landscape in front of our eyes, much like a photograph today. The principle of the camera obscura had been well known for centuries, with applications in both science and art. It consists of a room with a pinhole in one side. When light enters the room through this hole, the image or view seen through the hole is projected onto the opposing wall of the room. Although the projection is inverted, careful use of mirrors ensures that the image is turned the right way up. Niépce's initial idea involved using a miniature version of this concept and the careful use of light-sensitive chemicals to colour areas of a removable plate positioned within the camera. The idea was that when light shone through the camera's pinhole, the chemicals would impress the projected image on the plate, and that this image would remain visible upon removing the plate from the camera. The year of Niépce's first experiments was 1816, but by this time his idea wasn't new. As early as 1799, one Thomas Wedgwood used the light-sensitive properties of silver nitrate to establish silhouette-like images on paper or leather. He also attempted similar experiments with a camera, but was unable to get an image to form. He found as well that the silhouettes he created would disappear unless viewed in a dark area, which was a consequence of the silver nitrate on the surface of the paper or leather continuing to react with light even after the initial image was developed. This was where Niépce came in. He had more luck establishing images in a camera, but, like Wedgwood, had a hard time fixing the initially created image. He overcame this hurdle by using bitumen of Judea, which hardened with exposure to light. This way, the areas where light shone on a bitumen-coated surface could be preserved, while the softer bitumen in darker areas could be washed away using a solvent. Niépce used lavender oil and turpentine to produce an image. Niépce called his invention heliography, and it was the method through which he took the world's first photographs. In other words, his contribution was vital in making photography a reality after the earlier ideas and experiments of Wedgwood. Niépce therefore confirmed that photography was possible, but the process he used was still raw and impractical. The bitumen had to be exposed to light over the course of several hours to produce an image. This problem stopped him from publishing his findings or revealing them to the public at large as he searched for ways to shorten the exposure time. In the meantime, he was beginning to correspond with someone who would change how the public viewed his legacy for decades to come. Louis Daguerre was a stage designer, acclaimed for his diorama displays, who had begun to experiment with photography a few years after Niépce. With Niépce admiring Daguerre's dioramas as much as Daguerre admired Niépce's heliographs, they found kindred spirits in each other and formed a business partnership in 1829. The idea of the partnership was to work together to improve Niepce's existing heliographs and bring them into a practical form. Both parties agreed that any profits received from their developments would be divided equally between them. At this stage, Niepce was the clear senior partner in the relationship. The results of his experiments far surpassed those of Daguerre, who had no formal scientific training and, in fact, was yet to produce a successful picture. The guidance Niepce could give Daguerre was invaluable. Daguerre needed Niepce to make his own dream a reality. From this beginning, however, Daguerre would be the main contributor through the remainder of the partnership. This was accentuated after Niepce's death in 1833, passing on his share in the partnership to his son Isidore. Isidore's contributions to photography were minimal, while Daguerre had many notable successes, developing a method using silver iodide and mercury that brought exposure time down to just 20 minutes. Now, Daguerre maneuvered himself into a more prominent position than the late Niepce within their partnership, significantly naming his new process after himself. Some of this was justified. The daguerreotype was far more practical than heliography, and did differ considerably from its predecessor. It's also worth mentioning that Daguerre didn't seek greater financial reward than the Niepce family. As stipulated in the partnership, profits would continue to be shared 50-50, nor did Daguerre deny Niepce's claim to his heliographic method. Nevertheless, when the invention of photography was finally announced to the public in 1839, Daguerre's process naturally attracted most of the public further. Niepce's role was largely ignored, and his methods were even dismissed as primitive in comparison with the daguerreotype. It was a sad state of affairs, and it meant that Niepce's work faded into obscurity, something that may have contributed to his heliographs being poorly preserved throughout the following decades. Events, however, could have played out so differently. In 1827, during some of his most experimentally fruitful periods, and before he had started working with Daguerre, Niepce travelled to the UK to visit his ailing brother Claude, who was residing in Kew. There he came across Francis Bauer, a Fellow of the Royal Society who heard of Niepce's heliographs and convinced him to make the Society aware of his remarkable discovery. This he did, writing up a brief description of his process and providing hard evidence of some of his successful experiments. He declined to include any description of the materials he used, however, and it was on this basis that the Royal Society more or less shunned Niepce's communication. This was a sliding doors moment in photographic history. How might events have panned out had Niepce found more of a willing audience in the UK? Perhaps Daguerre would never have succeeded in his photographic experiments. As it happened, Niepce returned home unheralded in the early part of 1828. Before he returned to France, however, he left Bauer, his greatest champion, with a successful photograph created using the heliographic process. This is a crucial detail. The Bauer heliograph was one of 3 Niepce photographs assumed to have survived after his death. Of the 2 others, one was known to have been sent to Daguerre, but thereafter disappeared from historical record. The other came into the possession of the French Photographic Society later in the 19th century, but was allegedly destroyed in the 1900s. By the 20th century, therefore, the Bauer heliograph seemed to be the last surviving Niepce heliograph, and therefore the world's first surviving photo. Flashing forward again to the 1950s, this helps to contextualize the significance of Helmut Gernsheim's mission to uncover this Niepce work. Success in locating it would mean preserving a unique relic, one that could demonstrate Niepce's pioneering experiments and place it alongside Daguerre in the history of photography. The circumstances were challenging, though. By auction and inheritance, the work had passed through a few different hands after Bauer's death, but after it was exhibited at the Crystal Palace in 1898, the trail ran cold. The photo had seemingly vanished. Even its subject was not known with certainty. Popular belief was that it showed Kew Gardens and was taken during Niepce's visit, but this was based on shaky evidence that Gernsheim would refute during his search. Gernsheim's appeal for information in the Observer did produce a lead, but it was not good news. Gibbon Pritchard, the son of the last known owner, reached out and broke the news to Gernsheim that his family had not seen the photo since it was last exhibited, and he believed the exhibition had never returned the photo back to them. Without further information, Its whereabouts were a mystery. There was every chance this Niépce piece, just like the others, was lost to time. Then, almost 2 years after the initial communication, came an unexpected message. Gibbon Pritchard had just passed away, and his widow uncovered a chest containing her late husband's family artifacts. Within were letters between Niépce and Francis Bauer, as well as the Holy Grail, Niépce's first photograph, confirmed by writing on the back that matched with earlier descriptions of the image. Gernsheim duly came to inspect the heliograph, and, upon tilting the plate to increase the contrast of the photo, revealed the long-lost image, a view through a window in Niépce's house. The long exposure of Niépce's heliograph process is visible in the faintness of the image and by the fact that the sun appears to be shining in multiple directions. On screen is actually a reproduction, created after Gernsheim rediscovered the photo. The original looks something more like this. To this day, this is still the only Niépce photo that has surfaced, although surviving letters had always demonstrated Niépce's contributions to the development of photography. His last remaining work makes clear that he deserves to be recognized alongside Daguerre for his pioneering role. One thing I think this story demonstrates is the fact that inventions are almost invariably the product of direct or indirect collaboration between multiple people, rather than necessarily down to just one shining individual. In this case, we've spoken about Niépce and Daguerre, as well as Thomas Wedgwood's earlier experiments, but there are many other names that are noteworthy in the development of photography. William Henry Fox Talbot developed his own original photographic process at the same time as Daguerre, completely independent of any of Niépce's and Daguerre's work. To be fair, Talbot tends to get his fair share of credit, but there are other names like Hercule Florence and Hippolyte Bayard who probably deserve more attention than they tend to get. This is before even mentioning people whose work set the foundations for photography to be invented, like Johann Heinrich Schulze's experiments with silver nitrate's light-sensitive properties in the early 18th century. After 50 years without seeing the light of day, Niépce's heliograph is now preserved and honoured. Gibbon Pritchard's widow generously donated it to Gernsheim's collection after it was uncovered, and Gernsheim later sold it to the University of Texas in Austin. There is where it still resides, and it can be seen in the university's Harry Ransom Center.